Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. The participants have slowed down a little bit. So first off, good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, we did just want to let everyone know that this workshop is going to have live Spanish interpretation. So to start, I'd just like to turn it over to our interpreter, Frida Bloom, who will provide some interpretation instructions for everyone tonight. Frida?
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. Muy buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a esta sesión. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session. Mi nombre es Frida y seré su intérprete para esta tarde. My name is Frida, and I'll be interpreter for this meeting. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation in English and Spanish. If you're bilingual, you don't have to click anything. But if you're not bilingual in English and Spanish, and you're on your laptop, please locate the icon shaped like a globe at the bottom of your screen, click on Language Interpretation, and then select English. If you're on your phone or your iPad, then select the three-dot menu in the upper right corner of your screen, click on Language Interpretation, and then select English. When you speak, do so at a moderate pace, because the interpreter is going to be simultaneously interpreting everything you say. A efecto de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional al inglés y al español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada, pero si usted no es bilingüe y está en su computadora, por favor localice el icono en forma de globo que está en la parte inferior de su pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish. Si usted está en su iPad o su teléfono, entonces localice el menú de 3 puntos en una de las esquinas de su pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish y después aceptar, finalizar o done. Cuando hable, hágalo en español. El intérprete estará simultáneamente interpretando todo lo que usted diga. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frida. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and move on to our next slide. And just some housekeeping items before we kind of jump into the workshop. This workshop is being recorded. The recording will be posted on our website and our YouTube page, the APCD YouTube page, shortly after the meeting. Audio abilities are for attendees are disabled by default. If you're an attendee, you'll need to be unmuted by the host to speak. Panelists are able to mute and unmute on their own. If you do have questions, we kindly request that you use the Q&A feature in Zoom tonight so APCD staff can track them more efficiently. And comments can be submitted in writing via the chat feature in Zoom anytime during the presentation or verbally at the conclusion of the presentation. APCD staff will attempt to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar today, if there are any, and provide an opportunity for as many comments as possible at the conclusion of the presentation. Comments may also be submitted to me directly, Nick Cormier, at the email address on the screen, directly via email to no later than October 20th, 2021. However, this is just the initial kickoff workshop for this process, and I will stress that a couple times tonight. So there will be plenty more opportunities for comment and participation as we move ahead in the process of updating this document. Finally, if you're unable to virtually access Zoom at any point during the presentation, you can also use your telephone to call in using the number and access code included on the slide. And also, before jumping into the presentation today, we did just want to note that today is California Clean Air Day. California Clean Air Day is a project sponsored by the Coalition for Clean Air and is an opportunity for individuals, residents, and organizations and public agencies to reinforce their commitment to cleaner air. APCD is encouraging fellow Californians to take the pledge on the Clean Air Day website to help clear the air, breathe better, and support the health of your community. By even taking small actions, you can be part of the solution to reduce air pollution so that we can have clean air for all in San Diego County. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the 2021 Regional Air Quality Strategy Kickoff Public Workshop. My name is Nick Cormier, and I'm an air quality specialist with the Air Pollution Control District. With me today are a number of my esteemed colleagues at APCD who are on hand to assist me with answering any questions or to comment in their respective fields of expertise if needed. We're happy to have have you here and to take time out of your busy day to be with us this afternoon and to be here to talk about the very important issue of reducing ozone pollution here in San Diego County. Here's an overview of what we're going to cover today. First, we'll again provide a few workshop logistical announcements. Next, we'll discuss the nature of the ozone pollution problem here in San Diego County and its adverse impact on public health. We'll then provide a brief background on the region's historical state ozone plan, known locally as the Regional Air Quality Strategy, or RAQS. Then we'll discuss some preliminary thoughts and ideas APCD has about the next RAQS we're required to complete, including the physical setup of the document itself, as well as potential measures on our radar that we're thinking about to further reduce ozone. And finally, we'll have plenty of time to take your feedback and suggestions for how we can improve and reshape our state ozone plan following the presentation. But first, let's go over some workshop logistics. If you'd like to participate in the webinar, you have one of three options in Zoom. First, if you'd like to submit written comments or have issues using Zoom during the meeting, please use the chat feature. Second, if you'd like to be put in the queue to provide verbal questions or comments at the conclusion of today's presentation, please use the raise hand button and APCD staff will then call and unmute you when prompted. Finally, if you'd like to submit written questions for APCD to respond to throughout the meeting, we highly encourage you to use the Q&A button in Zoom as mentioned. Using the Q&A box will allow APCD staff to track the questions better coming in and allow us to respond more efficiently during or after the workshop. APCD staff will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A boxes tonight throughout the meeting. We're also going to be conducting a few polls tonight during the presentation to learn more about who's in attendance. The first of which we're going to jump into right now. We'd like to know what area of San Diego County you reside. We'll go ahead and put up the first poll right now. Please respond to the poll and select the best option of where you currently reside here in San Diego County. If you don't happen to live here, there's also an option to select that you don't live here in San Diego County. So we'll leave that poll up for a few minutes, or actually a minute or so. Okay, we'll give it about, oh, there we go. Looks like we've got the poll ended. So here are the results of the poll. We've got a pretty good smattering of people from all over the county, and then we also have some that are from outside the county. So that's a good representation of who's here tonight. So thank you all for responding to that poll. Let's go ahead and, oh, I'm sorry, did we not share the poll? Sorry. Let's see. There we go. There's the results of the first poll. So that's the first poll. So now we've got that one done. We do have a second poll. Sorry about that, everyone. We do have a second poll that we'd like to know what group you're here representing this afternoon, if any. If you are not representing any specific group or organization or business, feel free to simply select that you're a resident of San Diego County option, or just simply select the one that you feel matches closest to your situation. It looks like the poll is up, and so we'll give everyone a couple of seconds to respond to that poll now. And we'll maybe give it another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll go ahead and close the poll out and share the results. Okay. So it looks like we have definitely some residents of San Diego County unaffiliated with any group, and then we also have some representatives from the industry or business, and then also some representatives from public agencies and local governments. Thank you, everyone, for responding to this poll that really helps out and for us to understand who's on the line tonight. Okay. So next, I'll provide some background on the ozone pollution problem here in San Diego County, why we're required to prepare a state ozone plan, and how it corresponds with our federal ozone plan. Before getting too far ahead, though, it's important to note that this plan is only designed to address ozone pollution. The region and APCD are also concerned with other air pollutants, such as particulate matter, diesel particulate matter, toxic air contaminants, as well as greenhouse gases and climate change. However, the only air pollutant in which the region regularly exceeds standards is ozone, and thus this plan's focus on reducing it in our region. That said, reducing emissions that cause ozone also frequently reduces emissions of other pollutants as well. And consequently, reducing ozone can provide co-benefits towards an overall emission reduction strategy. It's important to understand what causes ozone pollution. Ozone pollution is formed when common air pollutants emitted by all types of sources, including vehicles, off-road equipment, factories, consumer products, and other sources, chemically react under the influence of sunlight and heat. The concentration of ozone pollution is as dependent on the sunshine and temperature as it is on the presence of ozone-forming emissions. This ozone is harmful to breathe and therefore is regulated as an air pollutant at the state and federal levels. The sprawling metropolis of San Diego, with its sunny climate, topographic features, and proximity to the Pacific Ocean, is well suited to ozone pollution formation and buildup. Air pollution is emitted throughout the populated coastal plain. The ocean breeze blows it eastward across the inland valleys. As the emissions move eastward, they have time to react under sunlight to form ozone, which then becomes trapped against the foothills and mountains. At the same time, the cooler marine air displaces the warmer air aloft, creating an inversion layer in the atmosphere that traps the ozone pollution beneath it. That is why the district's air monitoring station in Alpine, located at an elevation of around 2,000 feet, typically experiences higher summertime ozone levels than other areas of the region. Although ozone levels are lower in the populated coastal plain, the entire region is considered ozone non-attainment because sources throughout the region contribute to ozone pollution in downward Alpine. The health impacts of ozone are well studied. In short, ozone makes it harder to breathe. It irritates and inflames air passageways. Typical symptoms include headache, cough, shortness of breath, and chest tightness when taking a deep breath. As with any health issue, impacts will vary widely by person. Children and seniors are at increased risk of health impacts. So are people with existing lung disease and those who spend time outdoors, which in sunny San Diego, that basically means all of us. And because ozone is fueled by sunshine, ozone concentrations are highest in the spring and summer months. And as I touched on the previous slide, ozone concentrations are typically higher downwind in the inland areas based on how and where ozone is formed. Cleaning the air is critical not only to avoid people from experiencing these health effects, it's also important for our regional economy. A study done by the National Resource Defense Council last year indicated that the federal air quality regulations will have helped avoid up to 5,100 premature deaths by 2030 in San Diego County alone. At the same time, the economic benefits realized from those avoided deaths and non-fatal illnesses associated with air pollution will have added up to $57 million in monetary benefits to our region. Clearly, cleaning the air can make a positive difference, not only to the health of our residents, but also to our local economy. The APCD is part of a coordinated three-tiered approach to regulating and cleaning up ozone and other air pollution. The United States Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, regulates emissions from interstate traveling sources, including airplanes, trains, and ships. Additionally, EPA regulates large stationary sources of air pollution, such as the biggest regional factors. The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, regulates emissions from on-road and off-road vehicles within California. CARB also regulates a broad spectrum of consumer products that we all use every day, such as personal care products and household cleaners and solvents. The Air Pollution Control District, or APCD, has primary responsibility for regulating stationary sources in the region. These include large industrial facilities, including power plants and landfills, but also smaller commercial establishments such as gas stations and dry cleaners, to name a few. Before moving on to the next slide, it's important to characterize emissions in a way that may be more understandable to those not involved in air quality every day. To do this, please consider the following comparison as we use the metric of tons per day. 1 ton of NOx emissions emitted per day is approximately equal to the same amount of NOx emissions that are being emitted from approximately 350,000 average passenger vehicle cars a day. To understand where we're going, and while there is still a lot more important work to do, it's also important to understand how much progress our region has made to date in reducing ozone pollution. Emissions of ozone-forming emissions, specifically volatile organic compounds, or VOC, and oxides of nitrogen, NOx, have been trending downward as a result of clean air actions that have been taken over the past 60 years at the local, state, and federal levels. As can be seen here on this slide, emissions in San Diego County have dropped by 58% since the year 2000, which is equivalent to a reduction of about 264 tons per day. In fact, emissions in San Diego County are now at their lowest levels on record. This is remarkable considering the regional and economic growth that has occurred in the same time period. These emission reductions have subsequently resulted in improved air quality, as can be seen on this slide. This is the trend line for ozone pollution as measured at our Alpine monitoring station, where ozone levels have trended downward over the years. There is year-to-year variability caused by weather primarily, and upticks in ozone are associated with hotter years. Overall, these upticks reflect a flattening of progress as opposed to a significant change in the wrong direction. Regardless, it's clear that additional progress is necessary in order to meet the standards and protect public health. But how does San Diego's ozone pollution problem compare with other metropolitan areas in the state? It's not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison because each air district has its own meteorology, topography, and mix of emission sources. However, all regions in California, such as the South Coast Air Basin in the Los Angeles area, as well as the San Joaquin Valley Air Basin in Central California, have also made considerable progress. That said, each of these large air districts are non-attainment for one or both standards, meaning that ozone pollution can still reach unhealthful levels at times. It is the goal of each of these air districts to further reduce emissions in order to attain the standards and protect public health. But moving back to San Diego County, what are San Diego's key challenges to attaining state ozone standards? First and foremost, mobile sources. Mobile sources generate over 90% of regional NOx emissions in San Diego County and are the #1 challenge to attaining all ozone standards in the region. Complicating this situation is that they are regulated at the state and federal levels. Nonetheless, this underscores the importance of the district's efforts to achieve as much emission reductions from mobile sources as possible, both through our incentive program and our mobile source enforcement program. The top 6 categories in which NOx emissions emanate in San Diego County are mobile sources not under the regulatory authority of APCD. These mobile sources include heavy-duty diesel trucks, ships, such as auto carriers, cruise and Navy vessels, off-road equipment, such as tractors, loaders, and backhoes, aircraft, such as military and commercial jets, cars and light-duty trucks, and commercial and recreational ships, such as tugboats, fishing vessels, and pleasure craft. And last but not least, stationary sources, which APCD has regulatory over, including factories, gas stations, power plants, and dry cleaning operations. CARB and EPA, who have regulatory authority over mobile sources, continually develop and adopt emission control regulations in the mobile source sector, all of which help our region reduce air pollution over time. This map shows the number of days in 2020 that different ozone monitoring sites in San Diego County were exceeded to get a sense for where most exceedances are occurring. As mentioned, most of the region's ozone is formed in our inland foothills and valleys. And that is why our ozone monitor found in Alpine, shown in orange on this slide, and which is furthest east and at the highest elevation, tends to have the most amount of exceedances of state and national ozone standards. As you move west, you start to see fewer exceedances of the standards, as shown by the yellow and green indicators on this slide. For example, the populated coastal areas of the county, which are primarily shown in green, all had less than 5 exceedances of the state ozone standard last year. Ozone is most appropriately addressed through a region-wide plan like the RAQS, given that emission sources found throughout the county and state contribute to the ozone pollution problem. That being said, some communities in San Diego County are still impacted by localized sources of other air pollution, such as from particulate matter or toxic air contaminants. Pursuant to state law and reinforcing APCD's commitment to improving air quality in these impacted communities, the district has established a local community air protection program, as well as an Office of Environmental Justice, to ensure equity is threaded through all of our plans and processes. As part of this program, APCD convenes the Portside Steering Committee, which recently completed a Community Emissions Reduction Program, or CERP for short, to address air pollution impacts specific to the Portside neighborhood of San Diego County. The Portside Environmental Justice Community comprised of the neighborhoods in Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, Sherman Heights, and Western National City, and was recognized by the state as an AB 617 community a few years ago. The CERP, as envisioned, will attempt to drive deployment of cleaner technologies and reduce exposure to air pollution in the impacted Portside neighborhood through incentive-based strategies, as well as regulatory, land use, and transportation strategies to reduce localized air pollution. Such strategies and equipment upgrades taking place in the Portside area will undoubtedly play an important role regionally as well, and serve as a catalyst for cleaner technology adoption throughout the county at large. The Portside CERP will be considered by CARB for approval at a meeting on October 14th. We highly encourage anyone who is interested in learning more about the CERP or who would like to get more involved in the district's community air protection program to contact us or to attend an upcoming Portside Steering Committee meeting to make sure your voice is heard. With respect to Portside, we did want to provide some useful ozone data that was collected by mobile air monitors running through the same community in 2019 during the ozone season. The district partnered with a company called Aclima to conduct this unique and groundbreaking mobile air monitoring on the back of Toyota Priuses. The color scales on the map indicate where ground level ozone was measured the highest and lowest. Roads in blue observed ozone levels at or around 10 parts per billion, and roads shown in red had levels observed as high as 40 parts per billion. As you'll see from these graphics on the slide, ozone levels were the highest in the spring and summer months, and then towards the end of the year dropped substantially, which aligns with what we see regionally at our regulatory air monitors as well. Throughout the course of the 9-month monitoring period, the ozone levels never exceeded over 40 parts per billion at any point. This should be comforting, as in comparison to the state and federal standards that are set at a level deemed protective of public health at 70 parts per billion, the observed levels found in Portside were substantially lower. Though this data is encouraging, it admittedly does not mean that the community never experiences an ozone exceedance. That can and still does occur at times, as the map on the previous slide indicated. But at the very least, it should provide some additional context and information of possible average ozone levels occurring inside the community at a very localized level. And now we'll go to our third and final poll, for the day. We'd like to know, in your opinion, what sorts of ozone pollution in San Diego County needs to be further controlled, and what is most important to you? Again, please respond to the poll and select the best option that matches your response. If you do think that all sources need to be further controlled, feel free to select the all of the above box. And we'll go ahead and give everyone a couple of seconds to go ahead and answer that. Please do respond. And I'm just noticing there may not be an all of the above box. So I do see that. So that we'll fix that in a future presentation. I do apologize for that. If you do think that you have a all of the above option, feel free to include it in the chat as well if you want to register your response. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and close the poll. And we'll see the results. It looks like the overwhelming majority of folks here tonight are very interested in controlling on-road mobile sources, followed by off-road mobile sources, and then kind of split between area-wide and stationary sources. So thank you everyone for responding to that poll. That is useful information for us as well. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding and some background on ozone in general, let's look at the Regional Air Quality Strategy, or RAQS. The RAQS only addresses attainment of state ozone standards. San Diego County is currently designated as a non-attainment area for state ozone standards. As you can see by this map, many of the major populated regions of California are likewise considered as non-attainment areas of state ozone standards. Areas that currently meet the standards, such as some of the lesser populated regions in Northern California, are considered as being an attainment for the state ozone standards. Because the region is non-attainment for state ozone standards, the region is required to prepare a plan for those standards. This plan, known locally as the RAQS, was initially adopted in 1992 and last updated in 2016. It has been updated periodically pursuant to state law as new measures become technologically feasible, improve air quality, or protect public health. Being a non-attainment area, the APCD must consider all feasible measures that can reduce ozone-forming emissions from stationary sources under our regulatory authority, such as industrial operations and manufacturing facilities. The individual measures included in the RAQS are then developed into proposed local rules that are reviewed by citizens and stakeholders in a public process and are then considered for adoption by the APCD governing board. The RAQS and any subsequent revisions require approval by the local APCD governing board, which in turn is then submitted to CARB. Unlike our federal ozone plan, photochemical modeling is not required to be included in the state ozone attainment plan, nor does the RAQS require any further action or approval by CARB at the state level or EPA at the federal level. Instead, the APCD adopts or schedules for consideration all feasible measures in order to attain by the earliest practical date. Finally, in San Diego County and in line with state law, the RAQS also includes a reevaluation demonstrating that state-based emission offsets are not required to attain state ozone standards. Emission offsets are very costly and are created when a company is required to compensate for an increase in emissions in one area by decreasing emissions in another area. This demonstration, known as a no net increase demonstration, looks at emission reductions from existing facilities in the preceding years and compares it to the anticipated emissions from new or modified sources of pollution. So long as emissions from existing facilities outweigh emission growth from new equipment, state offsets are not required by state law. It's important to understand how the upcoming RAQS revision relates to APCD's recently completed 2020 federal ozone attainment plan. For those who aren't aware, APCD's board adopted an attainment plan in 2020 as required under federal law for both national ozone standards, which are known as the NAQS. The 2020 federal ozone plan only satisfied federal Clean Air Act requirements, not California Clean Air Act requirements. And unlike the RAQS, the 2020 federal plan required approval from the CARB board, which will also subsequently require approval from EPA. Our 2020 federal plan was approved by the CARB board in late 2020 and was submitted to EPA for consideration and approval earlier this year. That federal plan, again, unlike the RAQS, required photochemical modeling to be conducted to scientifically demonstrate and project when attainment was likely to occur for both national ozone standards. That being said, it just so happens that the national ozone standards set in 2015 by the EPA and the current state 8-hour ozone standard in California are one and the same now, both set at a level of 0.070 parts per million. Thus, APCD can reasonably assume and project from the results of that photochemical modeling that attainment of the state ozone standard is likely to occur by 2032. Historically, the federal and state ozone standards had never really been aligned, and so this is somewhat of a unique circumstance in terms of our historical RAQS implementation. The RAQS historically and in the last 2016 revision has been comprised of 7 main sections to satisfy statutory requirements. The first section is an introduction and background, largely explaining what I just covered in this presentation today. The second section describes the historical ozone air quality trends in the region, population, and area-weighted exposure indicators that assess ozone improvement based on monitored air quality data and expected peak day concentration of ozone at region-wide monitoring sites, which represent the worst-case scenario for 1-hour and 8-hour ozone exposure. The third section delves into the rate of emission reduction progress that the region has made since the previous RAQS revision, and also includes historical and future projections of VOC and NOx emissions. The fourth section then discusses the heart of the statutory requirements of the RAQS, which is a status update of stationary source measures that have been adopted or implemented since the previous RAQS revision. It also includes a new evaluation of feasible measures that are being scheduled for possible consideration and, if warranted, adoption as local rules over the next 3 years. The fourth section also notes other measures under consideration that may need additional time or data to further investigate or schedule as a feasible measure. The fifth section has historically discussed the ways in which APCD can and do assist in controlling mobile emissions to the extent that we can. Though APCD doesn't have the regulatory authority to control mobile sources of pollution directly, we can assist in do assist in non-traditional ways. These include our incentive programs, such as our Carl Moyer and Farmer programs, and a status update on regional transportation control measures that are being implemented through SANDAG and other regional transportation partners. We also provide an update on the region's indirect source program, which attempts to limit emissions from stationary sources to the extent feasible that may otherwise contribute to an increase in mobile source emission activity. Section 6 summarizes the conclusion of the plan overall to state whether the region remains on track to attain state ozone standards by the earliest possible date, and also summarizes the findings of our no net increase demonstration. And then finally, Section 7 includes attachments to the plan. It sounds like a lot, and it is. It has historically been a very technical document and something that we hope to improve on in the next update, which is partially why we're here today. A Spanish translation of this slide is included on the following slide, which is here, and I'll leave up for a second or two. Which now brings us to our last portion of the presentation today, which is to discuss a potential framework for how APCD may reshape the RAQS into a more readable, user-friendly document that still satisfies all of our statutory requirements, but also gives the reader, which is you, the important information that you need. Do note that the following information and ideas are just tentative for now as we start to think about a new RAQS revision. And nothing is set yet, and we welcome your input and suggestions on how we could potentially make it better before the draft of the document is released for further comment. As mentioned, we've heard feedback that the RAQS is very technical in nature, and we tend to agree. While some of the data is required to be included, we believe improvement can be made in how it's presented, such that it could provide the public with a more useful, understandable, and concise document that all stakeholders can understand and take away key points from. This slide is tentatively what APCD is envisioning at the moment. It would include the first key chapter, which would state the purpose of why the document is needed and the overall vision for the future for where we may head as a region in regards to ozone pollution. To improve readability and interest, APCD is also considering only including specific chapters describing the following 4 key areas related to ozone. First, ozone's impact on public health. Second, ozone and its relation to impacted communities in San Diego County. Third, ozone's relationship with greenhouse gases and climate change. And fourth, ozone's relationship with mobile sources in the region. APCD is also considering shortening and summarizing the overall ozone control strategy section to give stakeholders just the important points of information they want and need. And last but not least, APCD is considering moving much of the technical documentation and analysis into attachments to the document, as opposed to being embedded into the document itself. We think this change alone should result in a much more user-friendly and shorter document that we hope will be more understandable to the public and stakeholders. A Spanish translation of this slide is on the following slide, which is now up, and I will leave up for a few seconds. As previously mentioned, APCD is statutorily obligated in the RAQS to consider and adopt all feasible stationary source measures that are found to be cost-effective and achievable in San Diego County. This is one element of the new RAQS we'll be required to keep, but possibly present in a more understandable way. APCD is always looking out for additional measures and rules that may have been adopted or implemented in other air districts in California or elsewhere. The measures that are ultimately found to be feasible and cost-effective are then scheduled for possible consideration and approval by our governing board at a future date. Those possible measures at this time include a wide variety of stationary source operations. Such possible measures APCD is preliminarily considering for inclusion in the next RAQS revision include control of NOx emissions from landfill flares, possible control of VOC emissions from large poultry operations, control of VOC operations from non-residential composting operations, and other measures that may arise through state or federal actions, such as measures required through our AB 617 Community Air Protection Program. It's possible some of these possible measures may require additional information before they can be scheduled for consideration by our board. And if so, they would be further investigated as possible measures to schedule in a future RAQS revision. As a reminder, these are just some initial concepts we're exploring at this time. We're interested in hearing your feedback today on any or all of these to see if they align with your priorities or if we should be looking into other areas not on our radar currently. A Spanish translation of this slide can be found on the following slide, which is here, and I'll leave up for another few seconds. One area of our new RAQS revision may look a little different and more robust is our mobile source section in relation to ozone, describing what APCD is doing to help. APCD is tentatively envisioning providing a more substantial update for this particular section. This would include a more substantive analysis of APCD's indirect source program, of which our governing board will be weighing in on potential regulatory options in late 2021 as required by state law. We're also likely to include a more substantive update on APCD's regional incentive programs, which include but are not limited to our Carl Moyer and Community Air Protection Program, our Farmer Program, and our Goods Movement Emission Reduction Program, which together comprise our Clean Air for All grant campaign. We're also likely to discuss new and innovative grant programs that we're either working on or have planned in the near future. Such programs include our public EV charging station infrastructure program with SANDAG, known as Cal EVIP, our old vehicle retirement program, known as SCRAP, and an upcoming regional Clean Cars for All program, which aims to provide funding to disadvantaged and low-income communities to purchase cleaner vehicles. APCD is also likely to include information about unique programs we're working on, such as our Portside Air Filtration and Monitoring Program, known as PAIR, as well as additional opportunities we may want to pursue at the state and federal levels. Finally, in somewhat of a departure from previous RAQS updates, APCD is also considering concepts in which the district can get involved in reducing ozone pollution in non-traditional ways, but still within our regulatory authority. This could include looking at ways in which APCD could provide additional incentive funding, develop best practices documents, conduct additional outreach or education, or get involved in an advocacy role in different sectors. As mentioned previously, we are open to hearing feedback on any of this at this stage, and if there are any priority areas in which we should be covering on the mobile source side as well, that may not be otherwise listed on the slide right now. Spanish translation of this slide is now up, which I'll leave up for another few seconds. Here's a tentative timeline APCD has for developing the new RAQS revision. Today is the initial kickoff workshop to get your feedback and suggestions before diving into the development and reshaping of the document. Our next milestone after today's workshop will be working towards releasing a draft of the new RAQS revision sometime in the spring of summer of next year. It is at that point the public will then have another opportunity to weigh in on the document, provide comments, and conduct additional public workshops with stakeholders. After incorporating and responding to feedback through a workshop report in summer of next year, we'll then proceed to have a final document considered by our APCD governing board in the fall or winter of 2022. And then finally, if the document is approved by our governing board, APCD would then submit the document to CARB, hopefully by the end of next year. I should note that while we indicated in our workshop notice that was sent out that we'd like to get our initial comments from this workshop by October 20th, please note that we'll certainly accept comments and take your feedback throughout the document development process. Please do contact us at any point if you do have ideas or suggestions that can improve the document or further reduce ozone air pollution. So we've covered a lot today. And again, we do appreciate you being here this afternoon and going into evening and fitting this into your schedules. But now we'd like to turn it over to you. As a reminder, if you wish to make a verbal comment at this time, you're welcome to do so when prompted by APCD staff. Please press the raise hand button on your screen or mobile device if you wish to be added to the queue to speak. The host will then unmute you when you're prompted to speak. We'll be giving everyone approximately 2 minutes to speak, so we have enough time to get through as many people as possible, but we probably will let everyone speak as much as they like, it sounds like, with the number of participants on the line. So we were not going to hold anybody to that 2-minute mark, I think. We've got plenty of time to talk this evening. So just be mindful of respecting everybody's time. If you're using your phone, press *9 to indicate that you would like to speak, and then when prompted by the host, press *6 to unmute and mute yourself. If you'd like to make written comments, please continue to use Zoom's chat feature. And again, if you'd like to ask APCD a question, please use the Zoom Q&A feature. And finally, to guide our conversation a little bit, there are a few areas in which APCD would like to receive feedback before we start working on the next RAQS revision. These include the following. First, APCD would be interested in learning about potential measures we should be considering for inclusion in the next RAQS. Conversely, we'd also be interested in hearing about potential measures we should not be considering for inclusion in the next RAQS. We're also interested to hear more about how APCD can address and incorporate equity and environmental justice into this RAQS revision. And finally, what else can or should APCD consider modifying in the next RAQS document that would help with transparency and your overall understanding of ozone pollution, or just in the document itself. All comments and questions and suggestions are welcome. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Eric Luther, from APCD, who will be facilitating our Q&A and comment section. So Eric, I will go ahead and toss it over to you.
Okay, Nick, we do have some questions in the Q&A box. First question, there's actually two questions from Renee Contreras that are related. How much of an impact does the city-provided wood-burning fire rings have on the ozone and PM 2.5 readings? Also related to that, the South Coast Air Quality Management District conducted a study that shows one wood-burning bonfire produces the same amount of PM 2.5 equivalent to one heavy-duty vehicle on the road for over 500 miles. So again, the question is, how does the city provided wood fire rings impact the result of ozone and PM 2.5 in San Diego?
Yeah, that's a good question, Renee. And, I don't know if any studies offhand that APCD has done recently in regards to looking into that specifically for San Diego County fire rings. I do know of studies that have been done up in the South Coast region, specifically looking at beach fire rings and the impact of PM 2.5 they're having up in that region. That's something that we could certainly send out after the meeting, but we could also look into this question a little bit more after the meeting in terms of what impacts it would have on PM 2.5 and or ozone. So that's something that I think we'll probably have to follow up with you after the meeting to get a full understanding of the answer if there's been any data done here in San Diego County, something that I may not have the answer to myself. So,
and just to, this is Paula Forbes, I'm the interim air pollution control officer. So let me just supplement a little bit of what Nick said. Our deputy director, Mayani Luther, has been looking into concerns about fire pits, I believe, that have been raised, and also pass those concerns on to the city of San Diego, who's also investigating the concerns. And our monitoring folks are also reviewing data that's been submitted on it. So just wanted to add that information as well. But we can continue to follow up after the meeting. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Paula. That's great, thank you. Yeah, we will definitely follow up with you after the meeting to provide that additional information.
And Nick, it looks like Renee also had their hand up. I'm going to allow them to talk.
Sure.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I apologize. We disconnected, so that's why I didn't see the question and answer portion when I reconnected. We were having some connection issues, and that's why there was two questions. Again, that the information that I quoted or about the one wood burning bonfire it was a study that was done by the South Coast that was sent to me by the Air Quality Control Department here in San Diego when I did reach out, I believe the beginning of this year, sometime in February, because I wanted to get some details from that. I know that over the past couple of years, there have been task force that include various entities here in San Diego to try to combat beach bonfires because of the amount of smoke and the residents that are complaining, including the massive contamination of our beach due to the wood being left behind and all the other debris that gets burned in those illegal fire rings, including the city fire rings, which are, I believe, at 180 that are provided currently. Also, because of the giant influx in visitors that we get, I think somewhere around 35 million pre-pandemic and getting there here in the next year or two. I personally live next to the beach, so I'm seeing a major spike in illegal bonfires due to the lack of fire rings. Everything that we've seen has been pushing other counties into banning wood burning bonfires to help with the combating of the smoke and the PM 2.5 readings. And they're trying to find alternatives, which are banning wood burning and going into a cleaner burning propane fuel bonfire pits. Now, there's a lot of municipal codes and a lot of regulations and restrictions. There's things that are going up to the city currently now. They're drafting new ordinances and laws to try and combat this as well. I've reached out to several departments just to educate myself and, obviously reach out to the air quality department to see if there's any other information. So I do apologize about the double question. It was just a connection issue. And we just wanted to, really get a better understanding of how we could utilize this information to help our environment, and move or update some of these regulations and laws in order to better sustain our community.
Certainly, thank you, and no problem on the dual question. That's totally fine, and we'll definitely be following up with you after the meeting when we've got some more information to share. But thank you, great comment.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Nick, next question from Frank Spurgeon. Are there any plans to include working with tribes in the updated RAQS, whether that be advanced notification of new source construction, Title V permit reviews, or including tribal data in designation decisions? Most tribes are located in remote areas of the county and are not the cause of ozone precursor emissions, but are significantly impacted by outside sources. Also, in your data analysis, are you seeing ozone concentrations increase in the higher elevated areas of the county? Curious about that, since our tribe is located at the base of Palomar Mountain. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Frank. In regards to the first question, and are there plans for working with tribes for the updated RAQS? Yes, that is definitely something that we're planning to do. We took a similar process for our federal ozone plan that we did in 2019 to 2020, where we did work a lot through the SANDAG interagency tribal working group to present information through that means. But we're also going to continue to reach out to tribes just through our typical processes. We're certainly open to having conversations or discussions with any tribe about any concerns or anything that may come up, especially in regards to permitting and that sort of thing. So we're definitely open to that, and we're planning to do that as we continue working towards this updated document for the RAQS. In regards to the second question, and if we're seeing ozone concentrations increase in the higher elevation areas of the county, yes, that is correct. I mean, our highest elevation air monitor, which is found in Alpine, does usually show increased ozone concentrations compared to other areas where we have ozone monitors. We don't have ozone monitors set up everywhere in the county. So, we're not completely, we're not completely sure of the exact ozone situation that may be occurring in the location that you referenced around Palomar Mountain. But you could certainly look on our website for the closest air monitor that would be there. And then you can kind of get a sense for maybe what the ozone concentrations are at that location. But I think generally speaking, as you get higher in elevation, as you do go towards the inland valleys and the foothills mountains of San Diego County, it does effectively act as a backstop for air pollution. And so, it's possible that there could be some elevated concentrations at that location. Hopefully that answers your question, but we're certainly welcome to provide some more information after this meeting if that didn't clarify it.
Okay, Nick, next question from Allison Wirtz. Could you explain emissions offsets or where you can learn more about those offsets?
I'm assuming this is in relation to, I would have to assume this is in relation to federal related offsets. In regards to Allison's question, we could provide some information to you, Allison, after the meeting of where to best find that, unless someone from APCD staff can provide an answer to Allison's questions on this front. But specifically in regards to state emission offsets, we do not have any state emission offset requirements at this time. So we can certainly provide some information about federal emission offsets to you if you like.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, I can probably answer a quick little response on that. So just to give the kind of brief overview of those, I guess I should introduce myself first. I'm Nick Juarez. I'm in our permits department here at APCD. And there's basically two phases to the emission offsets. It's in one phase, stationary sources can generate them by reducing their emissions more than is required by regulations. So typically that's a facility shutting down and not resuming operations. And what happens then is they apply to us, we review their application, and then we would then issue them credits for the amount of emissions they reduced. They then sort of hold those credits and they can then be used in the second phase. And that's when a different project is going to be constructed that's going to increase emissions. And if that increase is above a certain threshold, then they have to obtain those offsets or credits from another company, or from a different facility they shut down or something along those lines. And when that happens, they have to surrender more credits at a specific ratio than they're increasing their emissions. So it's a way to essentially reduce emissions on those large projects more than the increase that the addition of that new project adds.
Great. Thank you, Nick, for answering that. I couldn't have done that myself, so thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Okay, next question is from board member Shu. Where or how did we reduce ozone so much in the last 20 years? Which sector and regulatory measures worked?
Sure. Thank you, board member Shu, for joining us, and thank you for the question. In terms of how did we reduce so much ozone in the past 20 years, I would have to attribute that probably to two main areas in looking at our emission inventories and historical inventories. I think the first would be simply from mobile sources, and that would be primarily comprised of passenger vehicles and heavy duty trucks. Those sectors in particular, which CARB has implemented a number of mobile source regulations over the past decade to going even back 20 years or so. Those measures have worked wonders in terms of reducing the pollutants that contribute to ozone, which is VOC and NOx, as well as PM for that matter. So those measures have substantially reduced, for example, the emissions from passenger vehicles are actually comparably today extremely clean from where they were 20 years ago, and that's primarily the result of that those regulations. And there are more coming down the pipeline. CARB has certainly proposed a number of regulations to even go further to potentially reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well associated from motor vehicles. So we're kind of going into the next phase of moving into that world of further reducing emissions and trying to get it down, as close to zero as we can. So I would, hopefully that answers your question, but that would probably be my interpretation of the biggest contributions in the last 20 years.
Okay, Nick, next question is from an anonymous attendee. Is something like the South Coast Warehouse ISR rule or something similar being considered to tackle stationary sources or facilities that see a lot of mobile source emissions in the San Diego APCD area?
Yes, thank you for the question. That is something that is on APCD's radar locally. It wasn't mentioned a lot in this particular presentation, but there was a state law adopted a couple years ago. It was AB 423, which implemented a number of changes here at San Diego APCD. But one of them was to consider a indirect source rule that primarily looked at ports, warehouses, and distribution centers here in San Diego County. And so that is something that we are going to be looking at, and we are currently looking at concepts to bring to our governing board later this year, and get some direction from our board about potential ways that we could, go in terms of an indirect source rule or possibly some other type of measure that may be similar. Those concepts will be part of a public meeting, and so there'll be more information to come on that. But yes, that is definitely something on our radar. Whether or not it looks exactly like the South Coast measure, which has just recently been adopted, we'll have to see and look and determine that once we've got those concepts kind of in a better spot. So.
Okay, Nick, another question here in the Q&A from Brian S. I believe that the ozone measurements are a good proxy for the toxic air quality resulting from mobile sources. I use the AQI estimates from Weather Underground as that much more closely correlates to how I feel. Meaning most hot afternoons, I begin to feel ill from air pollution starting about 3 p.m. These effects are not from ozone alone, as I know the smell and feel of pure O3. There seem to be huge holes in the ozone monitors in the country geographically. Can we improve this? Related to this, Cal OSHA has 2 laws that I know of to protect workers which are routinely being violated since they cannot be enforced due to the lack of monitoring. Can APCD get portable monitors made available for people to borrow? The 2 rules are a temporary COVID rule to ventilate unless AQI is greater than 100, and another one to protect workers from smoke with AQI greater than 150. But these require EPA data, which does not exist. How can we get these enforced? Thanks.
Great. Thank you for the question, Brian. I'm going to first maybe perhaps ask if there, from at least from APCD staff on the line, is there anybody from monitoring on the line at the moment? Okay, wasn't sure. But in any case, in regards to your question, at least on the first question, if we can improve the number of ozone monitors in the county, that's certainly something we can explore. There's cost to consider in relation to that, and then also in terms of siting and the appropriate locations that EPA allows us to do that for regulatory purposes. There's a lot that goes into it, and frankly, I'm not the best equipped to answer that. But we can certainly look into that a little bit more and possibly follow up with you afterwards on a better response and if that's something that's feasible or not. And then I would probably say the same thing in terms of your other questions on portable monitors that people can borrow. And then, in regards to, your COVID question, that's something I think we're probably going to have to explore a little bit further offline to better answer that question, those questions. But we do appreciate the comment and questions, and I think we'll probably follow up when we have someone from our monitoring staff that can better assist with that question.
Okay, Nick, so we have answered the questions from the Q&A box, and currently I don't see anyone with their hand up.
Hi, Eric. We do have one follow-up comment from Brian S. in the chat, and I just wanted to make sure that we had that on the record too. Hi, I'm Kathy Kean. I'm with our planning and incentives team also. Brian S. wrote in the chat, further input, we need to restrict movement of mobile sources to speed the transition to zero emission vehicles, ZEVs. For example, ban ICE, internal combustion engine vehicles from the express lanes. We also need to help people to replace their vehicles with EVs. So not so much a question as a comment, but we really appreciate that feedback. And Nick, I'm not sure if you had anything else that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, no, just in terms of, it's a great question, great comment, Brian, again. I think those ideas are definitely being explored, certainly at the state level, by CARB, who does have the primary authority to regulate, mobile sources. But in terms of your last point there, and helping people replace their vehicles with EVs, that is something that APCD is definitely helping out with through our incentive program. I mentioned there was kind of a forthcoming program that we hope will be opening up soon, called the Clean Cars for All program. It's contingent on us, receiving money from the state. So that's why there hasn't been a big announcement or anything of yet. But assuming we do get that program opened, which we anticipate, well, we will, that program will allow us to at least assist people in replacing their combustion cars with EV alternatives, or if they don't need a car, they can consider a transit option or a transit type of pass. So that is something that's on our radar at the local level, and we're always looking for additional opportunities and grants where we could possibly assist on that front. And then in terms of, the first point of banning ICE vehicles from express lanes or potentially even on the road, I know that is, a topic of conversation at the state level that is occurring, but that would probably go beyond the scope of APCD's regulatory authority at this time. But thank you for the comment.
Okay, Nick, we got one additional question in the Q&A from the anonymous attendee. Will the Air District be reopening the Carl Moyer Prop 1B farmer program you mentioned in 2021 or in early 2022?
That's a great question. So we will be reopening those programs once again. It hasn't been determined exactly yet when those will open, but we're definitely, I think, looking towards the end of 2021 or early 2022 to open that program. So if you do have mobile source equipment, or if you're interested in, potentially installing infrastructure at your facility, let's say you're a trucking company and you'd like to, if you're interested in wanting to purchase an electric truck to replace your old dirty diesel truck, and then you also want to, potentially install some infrastructure, that's something that the APCD can assist with, and we'd love to be able to help you out financially on that front. So if you haven't heard of our incentive programs yet, or to date, we definitely encourage you to go to our website and look for the grants section, and then you can find more information about those programs, or you can give us a call or shoot us an email. We've got staff here that can assist with your particular situation, and we can probably direct you to something that might be able to work. So definitely feel free to contact us if you'd like more information on our grant programs.
Okay, and as a follow-up, is there a concern with missing out on the fleets with my 2007 to 2009, or model year 2007 to 2009 trucks if the program doesn't reopen until 2022 regarding eligible model years to scrap vehicles?
That's a good question.
Hi, Nick.
Kathy, but yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking you might be able to help out with that.
There is a concern. We know that those compliance deadlines are coming up quickly, and so the eligibility requirements are getting stricter, and the times are running out to have money available to transition those trucks. We know that the opportunities are very, very limited for replacing diesel trucks with newer diesel trucks, but there are new opportunities coming to replace those trucks, particularly with zero emission electric or hydrogen trucks. And so I would encourage you to check out our website. And also, if you have questions, if you have some particular pieces of equipment that you're interested in seeing are going to be eligible for the program, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer those questions for folks. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, so far there's no other questions in the Q&A, or there's no other hands raised.
Okay, we'll maybe give another 30 seconds or so. Maybe people there's maybe some shy people on the line. Maybe we want to try to get one more question in. And again, we certainly appreciate everyone's time in being here tonight. There's been a lot of good questions and comments so far, so we do appreciate that.
Okay, Nick, we have Brian S. with his hand up, so I'm allowing Brian to talk. Go ahead, Brian.
Wanted to add that in particular, I was hoping sometime we could add a ozone monitor to the Rancho Bernardo pollution monitor that we already have. I understand and appreciate your previous answers that people I'm trying to talk to aren't here today. But that is one specific request I've been working for, is to add to the particulate monitor in Rancho Bernardo an ozone monitor, because that's where I work, and I can't get my employer to follow the Cal OSHA rules without that data. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Brian, for that additional context. Yeah, we'll definitely pass this information along to our monitoring leads, and then I imagine they'll probably be in touch with you shortly in the next day or two to maybe explain a better response and provide some answers to you.
Okay, so far not seeing any other hands raised or any other questions in the Q&A.
Okay. We'll give it one more chance. But if not, we've got one or two more slides, so there might be a last opportunity in case anyone wants to get another question or comment in. But once again, we do want to thank you all for being with us this evening. If you'd like to stay up to date on our process or other federal air quality planning processes, I do highly encourage you to visit our website. It's at the tiny URL link on the screen. That will bring you to our APCD air quality planning webpage, where historical versions of our RAQS and our federal ozone plans are housed. And it will eventually be the destination where our draft version of this new RAQS will be. The new website, the same website also includes fact sheets that you can download that discuss the facts about ozone in our region, as well as some simple ways that you can just reduce air pollution in your home every day. Also included is my contact information for myself and my supervisor, Kathy Kian, who you've heard from tonight. And in case you have any questions, concerns, or need to follow up with anything you heard at this meeting or in the future. And that will wrap things up for us today. I'll just do one quick check with Eric. Are there any questions or chat that we missed?
I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being with us today. We'll go ahead and wrap this workshop up. And I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.